Here's a brief agenda. We're going to kind of go through a number of things, assuming that we have a wide range of teachers and educators here, from the people that are brand new to FOSS, the people that have been using FOSS for a number of years. So we'll go through some getting started things, and then we'll the reason why most of you are here is for the tour of the new FOSS resources that we have available. So we will get to those things. First, I'd like to start off by saying thank you. Thank you for being an educator. Thank you for coming to this session. It tells us that you are trying to find a way, given whatever circumstances you're currently in, to make this instruction work for your students. And that's an important thing, so thank you. And also thank you for taking time out of your day to do this. I'd like to thank those of you that inadvertently found the whiteboard feature on Zoom and are making some marks. It does help to decorate some of the slides, but if you inadvertently found your way there, if you could toggle back, we'd appreciate that. But I want to start off by sharing a story. When I was in 6th grade, I was in art, not particularly great at art, but I was in art, and we were challenged by the art teacher to take a bar of soap and carve it into a fish. You know, I felt like this is something that I might be successful with. I had some experience with, you know, some wood carving, and I had some basic principles in line. But, you know, making a fish was maybe a little out of my comfort zone. But we had this nice motivation that the winning soap fish would get their fish carved out of a chunk of ice with a chainsaw. The 80s. So I was really motivated as a sixth grader that I was going to do this and do this well. So when I started, my first try didn't go so well, but I started to look around for more tools. And I found some tools that were familiar to me. They felt comfortable. I was able to use them. I was confident I could get them to do what I needed them to do. But others were new for me. I didn't know they existed before this. And so when I started to use them, there was a learning curve there. But I know that I needed to do my best in making this fish look the way that it should. So I went ahead and carved my soap fish out, and I'd like to say that I won, but I did not. I'd also like to say that I'm a successful soap carver, but also no. But what I did get from this, and I think the point of sharing this, is that we're all asked to do something right now that probably isn't terribly comfortable for many of us. None of us really wanted to be here in these particular circumstances, but here we are. And so it's a question of how do we find the right tools so we can give high quality, engaging science instruction for our students. Some of these tools are going to come from FOSS. Some of these tools are going to come from your district. Some of these tools you may not be aware of, and you're not even sure where to find them yet. So we'll point you to the number of tools that we have available. We may make some recommendations of where you might find some of these other tools that are out there. But I think a caveat to that is we are a science curriculum, not a technology curriculum. So some of the questions around how do I do this with my particular area of technology that I have is a question that we're still trying to answer for as many people as we can. But we also need to recognize that there are a lot of different systems out there and a lot of different specifications. So we are trying to answer as many of these as we can as we go through. So for first-time FOSS users, we really suggest that you start with going to FOSS Web. Even if you haven't been to a training yet, FOSS Web is a good place to start. It has a number of things that you can do without even logging in. So the first place that you can go is implementation tools. And when you click on that, you get a pop-down menu that looks similar to this. And so the aptly named Getting Started with FOSS videos are a great place. This is what the page looks like. It has a nice video that's down in here that you can watch that kind of takes you through the pieces and parts of the FOSS module. What's in the boxes, where to find those types of things. There's also some recommendations about other places to go once you've watched this video. Some of these we'll be sharing here in a minute, but others you can explore on your own. The teacher resource introductory videos are new, and they started coming out in the spring. So if you haven't checked those out, those are fantastic things to do. They go into topics around notebooks, language development, using phenomena with FOSS. So there's some of those videos in there, and you could see classrooms that are modeling good pedagogy with those topics. Another place for you to go is the updates and help section. There you'll find a lot of information about how to set up FOSSweb, how to get things going for yourself, how to get things going for your students. And we have similar videos prepared for that as well. So this is the landing page that you'll get when you go to the FOSSweb walkthrough videos. You'll find some things up here at the top. This is where the link for this webinar will be, and some others will be there as well. So if you have a colleague that didn't get a chance to make it today, that may be a place that you can go there in the middle, as well as some specific information for getting students access to FOSSweb, whether you're a self-registered teacher or whether you're a district-registered teacher. So for those of you that are self-registering, these videos here are terrific for how to get your classes set up, and so you can get students capable of logging in. So when you as a teacher get to your module page, you've entered in some access codes that are described on the previous link, but this is what your landing page looks like for this particular module, Energy. So there's a couple of good places that you can go to here that provide some specific information for your module. So one of the things that you can go to is this Teaching the Module section. And there you're going to find a PDF-based e-investigations guide. So the print guide that you have, that is the digital version of that. We have it in 2 formats there. But we also have teacher prep videos, which are good places to start. It kind of shows you what's incorporated into each part, the materials that are needed, and so forth. And you'll see right under there the link to the teacher resource introductory videos that I talked about earlier as well. Another place that a lot of teachers will go to when they start is in the digital-only resources. There are some teaching slides that are available, and those are set up, I believe, for PowerPoint. You can modify those, edit those, delete slides, add slides as necessary, and you could use those during your instruction as well. This is an example of what one of the slides looks like from the teaching slides. These are meant to be student-facing, so we have these available in English and in Spanish. For those of you that are working with a single sign-on learning management system, Clever, ClassLink, we do have kind of a special support team for that. We do recommend that if you are having trouble logging in initially, that you first contact or go through the district, because sometimes there are specific directions from the district that you need to do in order to get into that. But if you're still having some issues logging in or accessing resources, you can reach out to those, that success team there as well. And I believe a link will be added in the chat below. We also have FOSSweb for the student side. It requires that students log in. If they're doing that through Clever or ClassLink, you'll see a little login there. But if they're using an email address and a password, they need a little direction on how to do that. So over in the updates and help section, we have website help. And this has a number of questions that are on here that people have asked that we can, or you can be directed towards answers and solutions for those types of things. But there's also a nice box that's here for helping students and families access FOSS Web. So when we click on that, you'll see a number of questions that come up, and these are little drop downs. But there's a video for logging in that, or for students to watch if they need support in logging in, or families can watch that as well. It's about a 2-minute video that you can share with families. We also have some information about how students can access the interactive student ebook. There's a nice tutorial video for that and how it's used. If you haven't seen the interactive ebook yet, we highly recommend that you do so. It is available in the digital only resources. So I am going to pause here for just a second. I want you to kind of, as I'm pausing, I need to check in with our team in the chat and see if there are things that have come up. But it's also a good time to do a little self-check to see, do you have the pieces and parts that you need in place to kind of get FOSS Web set up where you need to be comfortable with the resources as a teacher that you have available so far on FOSS Web, and we'll get into a little bit more on that. So I'm just going to pause here for a second, check in with the team. So we do have some questions that are kind of coming in about providing student links to things, and we'll get into that momentarily. What we're going to do in just a moment is, this is a nice image of Deanna in her little home studio that she has set up for remote instruction. And in just a moment, Deanna is going to model a lesson that comes from one of the 3rd grade modules. So you can get a sense of how it is that we at FOSS are approaching some of this instruction, and also to kind of get your gears turning about things that you can do depending upon your circumstances that you have in your district. You know, what sort of things are possible, what options do you have, what are ways that you can make this work? And it's a great way to start off by having Deanna kind of model some of these things. And then after she goes through and models this, I'm going to take you through some of the resources that we have available so you can see where she got some of these ideas, and we'll kind of share another resource after she has an opportunity to go. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the approaches there's some terminology that we use. We know that there are some schools that are doing some in-person learning, so where teachers and students are in the same space and they are following recommended guidelines. All of the things that we have here about recommended guidelines are recommendations. Again, you need to make sure that you follow the district suggested recommendations as those are unique to your particular scenario. So in-person learning, students or teachers are there. It might be a little physically different than traditional instruction, but they're in the same place at the same time. Remote learning has a number of kind of different terminologies with it. The first one we refer to as synchronous, and that is that there's an interaction between teachers and students that are happening at the same time, synchronously. The teacher might be on a platform such as Zoom. The teacher might be working remotely from a home, or they might be in their classroom and students are in another location watching this from a device. The other approach, or another term that we use, is asynchronously, or asynchronous instruction, and those are where the interactions between students and teachers are not happening simultaneously across the class. So that might be something where there's a task that's provided to students through, such as a reading or a multimedia experience or something similar to that. And we'll share a few of those. We also recognize that there are a number of districts that are doing a blend of synchronous and asynchronous types of instruction. So we're going to share a few options for that as well. So this is Motion and Matter, and I'm going to turn this over to Deanna to talk a little bit about what she's going to do.
All right, thank you, Brian. All right, welcome everyone, or welcome to our, you can see our home office. I'm here coming to you from Oakland, California. So glad you could join us. So again, this is our home office / FOSS studio that we've become very inspired by teachers and people providing professional learning in their homes. So we're experimenting here with how we can make science engaging for teachers and for students. So let's get started. We are going to do some activities from the 3rd grade Motion and Matter. And this module is all about trying to answer the question, what causes objects to move? And so what I'm going to do is we've come up with this kind of modified instruction for how we would do this during this period, and just simplifying the instructional design, if you will. So starting with an introduction, having some sort of activity, and then making sure we have discussion, really important part of this. So we're really not just about, here's a textbook, read it, answer the questions, but let's provide some sort of activity for students to do and talk about it, make sense of what's going on. So I'm going to ask Brian to stop sharing so you can see us here in full view. And I will be using, so right now I'm coming to you from just my laptop camera, my regular FaceTime camera here. And I'm just going to step back because I don't know if you have experienced this, but I really get fatigued just standing in front of my screen. So I'm sitting back here at a table, and I have a camera here, a little webcam that I got on Amazon, and I'm going to be switching back and forth so you can see close-ups of some of the activities that we're going to do from this module. So I am going to switch now. So I want to start with, oops, wrong camera here. Here we go. I'm going to start with our phenomena. And hopefully you can see this. This has a little delay, so I'll try to go slow here. But this is a system I'd like for you to observe. And just think about what's happening here. What are you observing? What are these parts of the system and what's happening? And you can go ahead, and of course with students, I would have them unmute and start talking. But you can use the chat as your voice. So what do you think is happening here in the system? And then I'm going to actually turn it, and you can think about what is happening now. How is this different than the parts of the system here? All right. So I can see some of you in the chat. It's kind of hard for me to see, but I see the word magnets. And yes, so we would introduce this idea of magnets. So we are exploring with magnets. So in the classroom, these are actually some donut magnets that come with the Motion and Matter and some of the other modules. And we explore with these magnets, and we can see that we can pick up metal objects like paper clips. And we can also see that, well, we can observe and feel that they pull together. And if I flip them around, they actually push apart. So that is the materials we are going to work with. I'm going to switch over to my whiteboard here that I use for instruction. Sorry, I'm going to look at the right camera here. So our equipment that we're using is mainly the magnet. We'll use some other things as well. And we're going to observe. So we're going to observe what happens when we take this magnet. And already what I've demonstrated, and hopefully I would have actually had students either bring some magnets, or I'd pause right now and have them go get some magnets before we kind of introduce some of this vocabulary so that they and a lot of them have already experienced these forces. So we go over the fact that there's a push and a pull. These are forces, and we name this a magnetic force, right? And that's the vocabulary we want to start using in our exploration. And so this force is magnetism, and we also talk about the idea that there's another force that's acting on us all the time, which is gravity. And as we're exploring with our magnets, we're going to talk about that pull being to attract, and that push being repel. So that's the vocabulary we're going to use to help us answer this question. Our focus question is, what happens when magnets interact with other magnets and with a paper clip? And I would have students at this point write this down in their notebooks, because this is the focus question for investigation. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to switch back over to our tabletop. And the first thing we're going to explore is, and this is something I might have provided for students ahead of time. So this is some of the activities that they can explore with magnets. So we're going to start with the swinging magnet. I'm going to put a magnet here. And I have another magnet tied to a string. And you can predict what might happen. And you can observe, but we see quite a lot of motion going on here. You know, I'm just holding this steady. It is moving, and actually, whoop, there we go. Okay, well, what if you don't have these magnets at home? If you're not able to get them to your students, I actually just went to my kitchen and found one of my favorite kitchen magnets that actually has a magnet on the back that works quite nicely for this activity. So this is something students can do. And we might use this to hold the paper clip on a string and see how that interacts with the magnet. And we can definitely observe some attraction there, and I can feel that movement, that magnetic force that's happening here. So here we have some evidence of magnetism working at a distance. That it doesn't have to be touching in order for there to be some sort of force happening. And that's how we can do that even if we don't have those ceramic donut magnets at home. All right, so let's continue our explorations. So another activity that we suggest for students is to look or to explore magnetism through materials. So here we have a tongue depressor, and I'm going to, if I just put the magnet on it, it falls. But if I put another magnet in the back, they can actually attract each other, and they can stay on that. And there's some evidence there of the force. Even though they're not touching, they are still attracting through that. Okay, so let's think of an example. If we don't have those magnets, again, I went to my kitchen, to my refrigerator, found one of my old pictures of my son, and you probably have lots of these from T-ball or Little League, soccer, whatever your kids play or your students might play. So I thought, well, if I could put this on a piece of paper, and I couldn't hold it with another magnet, but I could hold it with another, and here's my daughter, another of these magnets that are kind of large and have a large surface area. So here's some more evidence of magnetism through a material. Okay, what about gravity? So let me see if I can get a little close here. It might take a minute for this to adjust the focus. So another activity is the talking or the dancing magnets. And this is always tricky to do. You've third and fourth grade teachers may have experienced this one. Trying to get these to interact with each other, and I think you can see there's a little bit of movement there. And so we have the forces of gravity and magnetism working on those donut magnets. So I was exploring, okay, so if I don't have those, how could I do the same sort of activity, or how could students interact do this activity. And so I found these are magnetic blocks that my daughter used to play with when she was little. And I still had them around, so I thought, let's see if we can get these to work. And actually, I even like these better because you can really see that interaction going on. Pretty cool. All right, so there we have it. Magnetism, gravity. Let's go back to our pencil. And there we go. So we're coming back to this system here. So we know that now that these are magnets. And I want you to think about now, do we have more evidence that might explain what's happening here? Think about that for a moment while I set up one more example, one more system here that might help us to answer this question. So normally we would do this with a chair on a table. Again, this is one of my favorites to do. And instead of the ceramic magnets, I'm using, these are magnetite ones that you can get at souvenir stores. Actually been at the hall. I think we sell those at the hall too. And I have a paper clip to tie to a string, for those of you who are not familiar with this activity. And I'm going to pull the string out and tape it down. Sorry, I have a squeaky chair here. Now, I want you to predict what will happen when I pull the string. So I'm going to pull on this string here. What do you think will happen to the paper clip? So you can go ahead and write your predictions in the chat. I'll give you a second to do that. And I'm going to start pulling. And let's see what happens. Voila. This is the part where you all get to go, ooh, ah, and I wish I could hear you. So we have the phenomena of the floating paper clip. Oops. Pull that a little further. Okay, so here, yes, it's a wow thing, and it's very cool to see, but we want students to make sense of that. To make sense of this, so we want to have a discussion, right? So we would, and this is a great opportunity to introduce models, to do a class model, to help students to put these pieces together. And what I would want them to be thinking about are the forces. So what are the forces that are acting on the system? So we would talk about, and this might be when we introduce the magnetic field, right? So there's something happening here with the magnetic field when this paperclip is interacting. That magnetic field. And we also have gravity. So something is pulling this paperclip down. So if I kept pulling on that string, you all can guess what would happen. Gravity would start acting, and we would have, we'd actually have an unbalanced system, but right now we have a balanced system because all the forces are equal, or relatively equal. So again, this is just a very quick demonstration. We would slow this down with students. I would use my whiteboard and do some modeling of how do we make a model, having them help me to piece this together using these concepts. And then I would send them off to make their own system. So find some more evidence that magnetism, gravity, and other forces can act and make a system similar to this. So actually, I'm going to add one more thing here before I sign up. What will happen? We talked about the interaction with gravity and magnetism, and then we also talked about it working through other materials. So if I pass this through, do you think it's going to fall, or do you think the magnetic field will be strong and keep those together? Let's find out. Whoa! It's still there. Wow. All right, evidence. And I'm going to turn it back over to Brian.
Hey, thank you, Deanna. Let me get back into this. So there were a number of things that that you saw in this particular lesson, but before we get into the resources, what I want to make sure that we focus in on is that, as I said earlier, that a lot of you have been asked to do something that is specific to your particular district. So your district is providing you some guidelines on the type of instruction that you are providing. And with that, even in the webinar today, we have quite the range of people that have various amounts of different types of resources available. And so this isn't about everyone doing the same thing. This is about everyone finding the best way to engage their students in good science instruction, given the constraints that they have. So many of us, we can't do much about the constraints that we have. So this becomes an engineering problem. What can we do, given those parameters, to make this the best experience for students? I've got 2 daughters that are currently here right now. What they are striving for more than anything right now is human interaction. So one of the things that we need to be thinking about as educators is, how do we engage other humans in good conversations about science in the conditions that we have? So in order to do that, we're going to focus in on a couple of different tools. And I'm just going to switch over to this live to show you where this is right now in terms of FOSS Web. So right now, this is Motion and Matter as it is up on FOSS Web currently. In each module, you'll see a tab here that says Teaching the Module. When you click this, there's a number of resources that are down here. In most of them, the first document that's there is Designing Your FOSS Instructions. This particular one for grades 3 and 5. When you click on this document, what you'll get is a nice Google Doc that has a number of different recommendations or considerations to have. If you haven't used a view-only Google Doc before, a couple of tools with that. One is that you can toggle this table of contents on and off. For large documents, that works well. You can jump down to different sections. The other thing, for those of us that are, our glasses don't work as well as they used to, you can also zoom in using the view here as well. So this document and a similar one is going to be live for K2 in a day or two here. But depending upon your approach, there's a number of different places in this document to go to. The first one is in-person learning recommendations. So in the in-person learning recommendations, strategies for how to conduct science safely with some physical distancing. So there are general recommendations here in terms of different jobs you might provide for students and so on. Also in here, there are some recommendations for synchronous learning, setting up classrooms, things like that. I do recognize that putting things up in living rooms or wherever it is that you are might present a bit of a challenge for many of you, and this is something that you're going to need to talk to your district about what sort of recommendations they are making for what the instructional environment needs to be. Again, that's one of those tools that you're going to need to figure out where that comes from. But we provide some recommendations in here. Again, the goal is to think about what do we need to engage the students that we are trying to reach. What are ways to set this up so the visuals are relevant but not distracting. There's also some guidelines for video instruction that's in there. For example, Deanna did that version live. If you're in a particular scenario where you cannot do a video like that live, you can capture a video of you doing this, and then you can send that out as well. But the idea is that we're trying to find ways to engage students through this. Materials distribution, recommendations are in there as well. And then finally, there's some information about asynchronous resources that are down there as well. So that is available in every module, and we will get the K2 one up on the next day or so. So that is there. And that is again found in the Designing Your FOSS instruction. Underneath that is something that we refer to as the navigation matrix. The navigation matrix is something that I'm going to say this as clearly as I can. It is a constantly updated document. So, for example, I was working on this last night at 9:15. So links are being added to this as we can. You will see in this a number of different types of resources. So we have some recommendations for in-person learning. These are specific to the part. Sometimes if you're doing in-person learning, physical distancing might require you to kind of rethink some of those sharing or in types of engagements with materials. So recommendations are there. The middle chunk here is for synchronous resources. And we also recognize that some of these things can be also used in asynchronously as well. But as Deanna mentioned, that there are some steps that are in the investigations guide that are meant to introduce the experience. There's steps that are in the investigation guide that are meant to really focus in on the activity. And then there are steps that are meant to focus in on the discussion. So some teachers might do a portion of this synchronously. We really recommend having the discussion part of this synchronously because of all the parts about understanding science, students really need some guidance in terms of how to process the data that they're collecting, and that happens in the discussion. And so we've got some guidance there for the steps for the discussion. We have made a list of materials that for some teachers, they may not be able to access their classroom on a regular basis, but they might be able to go in once, twice a week to get materials and bring them to where they're conducting their remote instruction. So we provided a bit of a shopping list for those teachers that are in there. So these again are for materials the teacher needs to get from home, or I'm sorry, from kits, or in some cases, common things found around the home, tape, etc. Again, you need to make sure that you're following the recommendations from your district in terms of accessing material and those types of things. The approach that Deanna did was one that assumed that the teacher had access to materials, but students did not. In your particular scenario, you might have a different setting. So students might be able to use particular materials, such as jumbo straws or refrigerator magnets. Those types of things we are providing in this last thing. So materials that could be available at home or might come from the module. Again, it's really important to check with your district on that before sending home materials. We also need you to understand that there are sometimes we, as a program, cannot necessarily recommend materials to be used at home. I'm going to jump over to energy just for a second here. This is the one for energy, but you'll see here it's not recommended. For this particular part, students are working with D cells, wires, and bulbs, and for a safety issue, if you've ever seen children work with, or unattended children work with D-cells, wires, and bulbs, you understand why we don't recommend that at this particular point in time. But if your district has different recommendations, that is something that you'll need to talk to your district about. In the final column, and I think I'll just stay over here in energy. In the final column is asynchronous resources. So these are things that teachers can provide to students to do on a fairly independent level. As this document is set up, we recognize that it's very normal to engage students in in-person learning. And even as Deanna showed, for many of us, it's fairly natural to engage students even if we're doing a video thing. You know, type in the chat, you know, using a Jamboard or whatever types of other technology pieces are out there. Those things can be utilized kind of as the teacher decides that they need to. But as we move into the asynchronous resources, the engagement with these has a potential to drop off significantly. What we don't want to see happen is that students are provided with, when I was a teacher, busy work, packets that went home with just, here's 8 worksheets, fill them out, and then send them back in. That's a very, very low level of engagement. It might be easier for us as teacher, but in the long run, it's really, we need to find better ways to engage students in thinking critically about science. I think our approach is, it's much better to think deeply about fewer activities than think less deeply about many activities. So really trying to up that engagement. So you'll see some things up here top around homeschool connections. So when you click that, you will get to a page that looks like this. And this contains a number of resources for homeschool connections that can be sent home in English and in Spanish. There's letters about modules that go home in English and Spanish, and then particular things that pertain to each investigation are also found in this. So again, that is in this homeschool connection link there at the top. And then underneath there is a list of all the types of extensions or connections that are in there as well. In this in this row right here, this is for investigation 1, lighting the bulb of energy. There's a number of resources that are here that a teacher might use during this instruction. This is not a to-do list. We don't expect nor recommend that the teacher try to march through all of these things in order, one right after the other. But these are more of a menu for you to select from in terms of what is going to make your best, most engaging instruction that you can. So the first link is a link to resources by investigation. So when you click on the resources by investigation link, it will take you to a page that already exists in FOSS Web. So what this resources by investigation is, if I'm teaching 1.1 of lighting the bulb, I click on this, and what comes up are all of the resources, or I'm sorry, many of the resources that I might use. So there are teaching slides there, there's notebook sheets for display that can be used. If you're not signed in, you will get something that looks like this, and you will have to sign in. And when you sign in, then you will get access to this. So if you do see something that comes up that does not seem like it's a correct error message, make sure that you are logged in. So these are in resources by investigation. So one more time, back here to this document. We'll go through this one more time. This is the module page that I'm in. I'm logged in. I've entered my access code. I click on this, and I go to the energy navigation matrix. When I click on that, this is what comes up. So these, again, will populate over time. We are trying to do a multiple phase approach, so that way we can get some level of instruction out as quickly as we can, and as things progress, we will continue to add resources to this as they become available. So we've got these two links here, Homeschool Connection. We've got the link down here to resources by investigation. One other resource that's here are these at-home activities. So when we go to the at-home activities, these are things, if you used FOSS in the spring, these are some of the connections that we did in the spring. So these are meant to be done, families can do this. We recommend that you preview these and decide what's going to be the best fit for you, depending upon the type of instruction and the community that you work in. So those are there for you to look as well. So those are listed out for each part. And then we'll talk a little bit about the student side here in a second. You will see some particular parts. It's difficult for us, given the physical distancing needs and other kind of constraints, it's difficult for some of these parts to really unfold naturally. Series and parallel circuits and solving the string of lights problems are one of them. So again, this is something that you want to check in with your district and for some guidance on whether or not that those parts should be part of your instruction during this this fall. Again, just for everyone out there, this is just during this particular modified instruction time. These resources are here. We will continue to populate these. As you can see, we will pick those back up in a little bit. So I want to pause here, check in with the team for a second, and then we're going to look at the student side of this. Okay, so I'm going to jump over to the student side of things. This is currently not live, so you're seeing some super secret stuff right now that should go up in the next day or so. We typically do migrations for refreshing some new materials up on FOSSWeb on Thursday night. So Friday morning is a great time to come back and see what has changed. And also on FOSSWeb, if you get used to going to the updates page down at the bottom here, we document what updates have been made and the dates they were made on. So this is the student page for Energy. Again, if you need some directions, support on getting logged in, those videos that we mentioned earlier are there as well. So the student is going to click on this, and they are going to, then investigation 1, 2, 3, and 4 will be listed out here. So when the student clicks on this, those, they need to be logged in. And so if you are using Clever or other single sign-on things, or if you send people links, you do need to make sure that students are logged in for them to be able to access the materials. So you cannot just copy and paste a link and send it to students unless they have been set up on FOSSWeb and are logged in. Hey, all right, so I'm going to go back down to Energy here. This is student page we're going to. And we're clicking on investigation 1. So here's the landing page for students for investigation 1. You'll see that there are parts, part 2, and so on. This will continue to get populated as we have these up. But this interactive ebook, so these links will be set up, and they will take you to the interactive ebook. There are some supports around using the interactive ebook if you need those on the help pages. Online activities around lighting a bulb, so students can go there, they can click these things and be brought right to the multimedia resources. We're going to have these in English and Spanish as well. As we get those developed, we will put those up there. This will link to the at-home experiences. So if you are providing those for families, you can tell them to log in and navigate to that and find that. The last part that I want to share on the student side is this is a new student video. So in particular circumstances, particular parts, we have identified that a need for a video which is originally designed to be asynchronous, but we've also found that it can be done synchronously as well. The first time you show one of these new student videos, you are going to have to provide some directions to it about how they use notebooks, where they're going to record things, how they're going to communicate back and forth with you around that. So again, we don't want you to send any of these things home cold and then never discuss them again. You need to provide a little bit of direction on how students are to use these, have them do the particular experience, and then come back and then help them process those things. So to that extent, here is lighting a bulb. This is a video that we have. I'm going to show a portion of this to you. Everyone can see that.
Here is a flashlight. It isn't working. What can we do to get the flashlight working? We need to add D cells. Another part of the flashlight is a light bulb. The focus question for this part is, what is needed to light a bulb?
So if I was using this with my students, I might show that particular portion and I might pause the video here and say, all right, students, what I'd like for you to do now is I'd like for you to take out your notebook, and I want you to get in the habit of whenever you see a question that comes along like this, I want you to go ahead and put that into your notebook. So let's get that recorded. Pause, wait for a little bit for that to happen.
We are going to use a D cell and some wires to try to light a bulb.
And then here, as Deanna said, we kind of have an intro, an activity, and then a discussion part of it. So depending upon your scenario, you might find that you show the introduction or have students watch the introduction and the activity, and then you do the discussion part synchronously. So you can kind of mix and match this part, a little bit of choose your own adventure.
Sometimes when we connect the wires, the bulb lights. Sometimes the bulb does not light. Here are some systems we can try. Before we do, make a prediction if you think the bulb will light. Pause the video and make your predictions on the notebook sheet for all 6 systems. You'll pause the video whenever you see this icon. Now that you have your predictions, let's test them. Here is System A. Pause the video and record your observations in your notebook. Pause on each system.
So this one kind of goes, if you're familiar with this experience, there's 6 different systems that there's data for. One of the reasons why we've done this video, as you can see here, it's really difficult to hold, as a teacher, a D cell, 2 wires, and a bulb and get everything to go where you need it to. So we took some time and tried to put that so you as a teacher, it can be helpful for. We don't quite have the capacity to do this for every particular part in every particular module, but we are trying to do them at very critical parts and really looking at which parts are going to be challenging to do during this particular part. There's discussion questions that are here as well.
A and E.
That
System A didn't
are
work.
coming right out of the investigations guide.
What is
They
different?
get kids to, again, focus critically on important things. And as a teacher, I might pause the video here and say, I'd like you to go over to insert whatever piece of technology you're going to use, this Jamboard, this Padlet, whatever it is. And I want you to really just document what you think is the difference between these two systems and why this one might. So you can do things to kind of help capture what students are thinking, even if you are using something that at first glance doesn't seem as engaging. So the engagement is really going to come from us as a teacher. And again, humans, like my one in the other room, starving for attention right now from people that they have held as a safe place and a comforting place. So we need to continue to do that, even though the mechanisms are going to be a little different. So I am going to come out of this again, and I'm going to show you, this is again on the student side of things. So this is, if I go back to this is student side, remote learning, investigation 1, takes you to this page, and this is where the video is. We are going to be working on that in Spanish, and that will come as soon as we can get it up and going. As a teacher, you will see back on the navigation matrix, back to this for you. You will see on the navigation matrix, you will see there will be a new video link coming by this. I can almost hear everyone screaming, I'd like videos for all of my parts right now, and I need them tomorrow because we start, the team of 12 of us, or however us are working on it, are doing the best that we can. Many of us are putting in long days, and also instructing our students, or our children as well. So we are with you, we are trying, and we'll get those up as soon as we possibly can. So I'm going to jump back into the PowerPoint to kind of finish this off here, and go through a bunch of things that I've already showed you and get you to here. So one of the things about notebooks, especially comes up now given the time, is that we have some things around notebooks that we can do, that we do have available. So full and half-size printable PDFs are available. Let me resume this, because I think I paused it. There we are. So we're thinking about notebooks. We have full and half-size notebooks available. And we have form-filled PDFs that are available, as well as coming soon, Google Docs will be available. Some districts are considering how to kind of manage notebooks during this time. I'd like to just take it back to what you believe the purpose of a notebook is. We really think about documenting the work of scientists and really being a vehicle to communicate their understanding. So equivalent to a bit of a rough draft in language arts. We want to make sure the notebook is accessible by all students. And accessible also means that if they're doing things outside, what is the best way for them to use a notebook if they go outside? My current setup right now, if I had to go outside with a digital notebook, would be difficult because I've got a desktop right now. So thinking about different levels of accessibility as well. Student ownership, so what are the kind of, who owns it? What does that look like? What are ways that we can promote student agency within these notebooks as well? And that kind of gets to the idea of rules of engagement. It's really important that students understand that this is their notebook and this is something that they're keeping for themselves. And last is, if you're going with a digital notebook, is the availability of tech support in the district. We can help around some of these things around the top of this, but we don't claim to have intricate knowledge of all of the different note-taking apps that are out there and what's supported by your district. So those are things to kind of consider as you think through the use of notebooks during this time. a couple of just kind of, if you're interested, for new teachers, there are some sessions that will be happening next week for K-5 and 6-8, and the resources there, the jot form is there. And I think the last is to really start to think about what tools do you have, what tools are you comfortable with, and how do you use those tools to make the best type of engagement for your students, given this scenario that we're all in. You know, just kind of think about what are ways that we can make this a rich experience for students. So with that being said, just pause here for copyright. And finally, if you have some feedback for us, the first two questions on this, we have a tiny URL, are kind of some information about you, but this last question is something that's really important for us. So what other FOSS resources would help you teach FOSS successfully this school year? So we do really take those recommendations or those thoughts about additional resources to heart. So please make sure that you communicate those in that jot form as well. With that, I know we're a bit over time, so I apologize for taking those 3 minutes. We would like for you to, you know, once you have this completed, you can say goodbye to friends or new friends that you've made in the chat, and then we thank you for coming. We will give you a couple minutes here, but around in about 3 or 4 minutes, we'll move everybody that's still in here over to the waiting room as well.